you know, it is what it is.
Roger Ebert was wrong, right? Games are art.
You know, I remember when I said that to a journalist, that I said to him, like, he's totally full of shit, that guy. You know, tell him to go fuck himself. That's how wrong. He called me the day after. He's like, Roger Ebert died today. I'm like, oh shit, don't write that.
This is a 2018 interview with the creator of A Way Out, Joseph Ferris, which he is asked about Roger Ebert's stance on video games. If you don't know who this guy is, I mean, you can figure that out for yourself. Just go to AskJeeves.com. But the long and short of it is, Roger Ebert was a prolific movie critic. I mean, honestly, I don't think it's out of turn to say he was the most famous movie critic ever. He's essentially the Tony Hawk of movie criticism, and what I mean by that is, he's the only respected person in a completely unrespected medium. I mean, can you even name another movie critic? Like, do you know who Matt Zoller Seitz is? Fuck off, bitch. You ain't Roger Ebert. Get off his site. But I digress. Ebert had a long and storied history with riling up freaks and geeks. I mean, freaks and gamers. In fact, when this specific interview happened, the man had been dead for 5 years. You really gotta strike a nerve with people if they're questioning your judgment this long after you're dead. Okay, but what did he even say? Well, the timeline gets a little messy here. At some point, Ebert said video games can never be art. I can't find the original instance or full quote. Articles pointing to his now infamous quote, as they put it, redirect to nothing. Well, it's not that important anyway. What is important is that Clive Barker, renowned writer, filmmaker, and gay man, he also dabbled in video games, challenged Ebert's views at the 2007 Hollywood and Game Summit. Ebert responded to some of these criticisms via his website.
We can debate what art is. We can debate it forever. If the experience moves you in some way or another, even if it moves your bowels, I think it's worthy of some serious study.
Perhaps if the experience moves your bowels, it is worthy of some serious medical study. Speaking of bowel movements, I do believe this is when shit hit the proverbial fan. People were not happy with his opinions on games. One thing I love about Roger Ebert's site is it still has all the comment sections, so if you really want to, you can go and see what people thought about this at the time. Of course, it was not limited to his own comment section. There were plenty of articles discussing this, and I'm sure there were many a forum post complaining about old Roger Ebert. Still, Ebert would not refine his opinions until 3 years later in his article, Video Games Can Never Be Art. It's an interesting read and definitely worth looking at, but it reiterates a lot of the same points, just in a more refined fashion. So clearly video games didn't command his respect, but there was one. There was one game that Roger Ebert genuinely loved. What game could have possibly interested him when he seemed so extremely dismissive of the medium? Well, if you guessed Duke Nukem 3D, I'd probably tell you to lay off the glue for a while.
Picking up. Then you're gonna hold it up to your nose and breathe in like that.
You read the title of the video. It's a game called Cosmology of Kyoto. Released in Japan in 1993, it was localized in 1994 for Mac and 1995 for PC. There's very little info on this game and its development. It probably doesn't help that this is a Japanese title, so I'm assuming any kind of article discussing development or intent would be confined to Japan, if there was any at all. As far as I can tell, the company and publisher of Cosmology of Kyoto created this game and then proceeded to vanish, giving even more merit to its anomalous factor. Ebert ended up playing this game long before his infamy within the gaming community. He wrote a review for Wired magazine in 1994 when it came out for Mac. In fact, it's the only game he ever reviewed. He gave it such praise as, "The richness is almost overwhelming. There is the sense that the resources of this game are limitless, and no two players would have the same experience. And there is the sense, illusory but holy fuck, stop using such big words! There is the sense, illusory but seductive, that one could wander this world indefinitely. This is a wonderful game." Truly, he was enamored with the. Holy fuck! $98? Jeez. Booting up the game, it's immediately clear why someone would be enamored with this title. Okay, well, it's not immediately apparent, especially with this bare bones title menu. We have a couple of options we need to pick out before we get started, such as our gender, whether we are single or married for some reason, and our name. Now, you will notice when we go to the box to input our name, it's merely white and no text shows up when we input it. This is the one and only glitch I experienced with this game, and it really isn't too big of a deal because most of the time you only need to answer yes or no. Sometimes you need to repeat a phrase, but you can just copy what the game shows you. Word of advice though, if you are going to play this game, when the text box appears, don't click on it. I don't know if this adds a space or something, but it will screw up your answer. When it appears, just type and you'll be good. There's also basic character customization, but this doesn't really matter at all. It goes beyond the fact that this game is from a first-person perspective, but we'll get to that later. Anyway, we're in the game proper now. It's immediately visually striking. It's very beautiful while simultaneously giving off an extremely haunting vibe, which is helped by the perpetually black sky. Some of the people you meet are proportioned like you would expect, but a lot of people have extremely exaggerated features. A lot of the poor are portrayed as such, and people of nobility or beautiful women are drawn properly, giving a nice dichotomy between the well-off and those who suffer. You can kind of glean what you're supposed to do in this first area. Grab the mirror, grab this guy's clothes and his money if you want, he won't be needing them. Punch this demon in the face and get this talisman. Then make your way to the city proper. Talking to this warrior guy gives us an introduction to a lot of the mechanics. He asks for the talisman, displaying how the inventory system works. Basically, it will only display relevant items when you need them. He asks you something, and if you're quick enough to say yes, he'll be alerted of this demon faster. And he'll give you a sword in return. Something also important to mention is the reference bar in the corner. The conceit of this game is that it's set in the medieval city of Kyoto around the year 1000 during the Heian period of Japanese history. Kyoto was said to be a city infested with demons and is the source of many legends. What the reference tab does is give you quick overviews and the real history of the events in the game. A lot of the people you meet were actually real, and all of the demons and events pertaining to them are based on folklore. Now, I didn't constantly consult this, but it was definitely an excellent resource to have when I didn't really understand what was going on. Now, what is the goal of this game? Well, it technically has one. It purposely obfuscates what it is from you. The game wants you to explore and try and figure it out for yourself, and honestly, beelining towards the finish would be missing the point. There is so much to take in this game. Just witnessing the bizarre things going on is entertaining enough in itself. You're merely a witness to a lot of this crazy stuff. People will acknowledge you, but a lot of the time you're just tagging along for the ride. In some instances, though, you are the arbiter of the situation, and it's up to you to solve the predicament you found yourself in. Just watch your step, though. Ah, shit, I died. However, death is not a big deal in this game, and is merely just another thing to add to the flow. When you die, whether by the hands of demons or bandits, you are sent to various realms of reincarnation. This is decided via the karma you gained based on your actions in the game. Once the player escapes these realms, they are reincarnated as a new person. This is why the character customization doesn't really matter, because it's more than likely you're going to die more than a few times. Honestly, there isn't a lot more to say about this game. It's pretty self-explanatory on what it's all about. Further discussion would merely be me just pointing at events saying, isn't this interesting? I did end up beating the game, which I did not expect to do at all. This is a mid-90s esoteric adventure game with a vague notion of a goal. I was content to just walk around experiencing what I could, but I stumbled on the end of the game, which is a nice bonus. However, I don't think experiencing the ending is all that pertinent to enjoying the game. I have a pretty good notion that this is the kind of thing you can just look at and you can tell if it's your kind of jam or not. I'll have the game linked down below. The fine people at the collection chamber have got it up and running for modern systems. God bless them. So that was the only game Roger Ebert liked, and in doing this whole exercise, reading old articles and looking at various opinions about video games being art, I have to ask, who cares? No, I mean seriously, why has Roger Ebert become this boogeyman of video games as an art form? In the interview I started the video with, he basically brings up Ebert more or less unprompted, giving credence to the fact that video games not being art is hardly an argument you see nowadays. Trying to find examples of people disagreeing with games as an art form didn't turn up a whole lot. A few articles here and there, but that's it. Not to mention, it's a completely subjective thing. If you told me that you don't like vampire movies because they suck people's blood, I would have a pretty tough time recommending you a vampire movie you would like. Similarly, if your definition of art excludes video games for whatever reason, I probably won't be able to recommend a game that doesn't exhibit the traits that would inherently make it not art to you. I don't really think these people are a problem, nor do I think they're the thing standing in the way of video games being considered art. What I do think is standing in the way, however, is gaming itself. Do you really think art is in mind when AAA games compromise their own fun by shoving in things like microtransactions, battle passes, and other such things to try and nickel and dime you? Don't tell me it's just free-to-play games either. Remember when Shadow of War had microtransactions? Remember when in Battlefront 2 you were more or less completely fucked against people who paid for loot boxes? Yeah, they eventually removed microtransactions from those games, but that doesn't mean it's a dead practice. Assassin's Creed Valhalla still has microtransactions. Assassin's Creed Valhalla is especially fucked because it's a single-player experience. They made the progression in the game super grindy, so you would be tempted to pay real money on top of the money you already spent on the game just to have a better time. What about games that are dead and you can never experience them again? Oh, what a good showcase of art that is. Maybe we should institute this lesson for other art forms as well.
Burn it.
However, beyond the actual game companies themselves, we have the gaming community. And I don't think there is a better example of a group of people trying to undermine art than those that endlessly complain about the Souls series. This is a dead horse at this point, but it's relevant because it's a dead horse that rises from the grave every time a new Souls-like game comes out. And it was especially horrendous this time around with Elden Ring. These games' core design is always questioned, and the people complaining about it act like it's an objective thing. The game is too hard. It needs to be changed. This is truly insane to me. This is a direct contradiction to the idea of video games being art. Let's take the movie The Lighthouse, for example. It's filmed in 4:3 and in black and white. This is a bold decision, and one that will ensure that a large number of people will not watch your film. But that's okay, because it's not made for those people. It's a niche film, but within that niche it has garnered a lot of praise. Souls games, and especially Elden Ring, have made bold choices, chief among them being difficulty. Sure, these games will never be as big as COD or Apex or Fortnite or whatever. Still, it has garnered a lot of success, and it's very clear a lot of people like these games. Elden Ring and Cosmology of Kyoto are probably more similar than people would think. They are both games that willfully ignore design choices that would guarantee a wider audience. Going against the grain, doing the thing that isn't necessarily safe, is often what makes art truly great. Elden Ring, Cosmology of Kyoto, any game, or any work of art for that matter, should not have their core identity questioned. Rather, they should be judged solely on the execution. I want to make a couple things clear. First of all, these complaints are not everything wrong with the gaming landscape when it comes to undermining itself. These are just a few examples. If we set out to cover everything I thought was wrong, we'd be here all day. Secondly, I need to be very, very clear that just because the games I mentioned and games like it employ scummy business practices does not revoke their status as art. I hate it when people make lines in the sand like that. You can't argue that a medium is art while simultaneously making exceptions. It's either all art or none of it is. Granted, it's bad art, or at the very least art that's been undermined, but it's still art. In all honesty, I have much more respect for a hardline stance of video games not being art than being wishy-washy on it. The thing that ultimately gets me about Ebert being this seemingly great obstacle of video games becoming art is that only a few months later from his original "Video games can never be art" article was a further clarification and a sort of retraction in the article, "Okay kids, play on my lawn." In it he states he was foolish to bring up the topic at all, especially when he doesn't play video games, so the point is more or less moot. What I love about this article is that it's not an apology. He still sticks to his opinion, but he grants that his opinion is merely that. Ultimately, you can say video games are art until you're blue in the face. But if you truly want to convince someone who doesn't see it as an art form, you're gonna have to do a lot more than just talk. You're gonna have to walk the walk.